Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
For those who don't know, I grew up in a small town in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Houghton, Michigan. And I love my hometown. When I'm traveling, that's where I'm going. I'm going to my hometown to go visit my dad, president of the Alumni Association for the high school. Got a pancake breakfast to be at. Should be a lot of fun. I love going up there. Growing up there in the 70s, well, we didn't have a lot of television. Let me put it that way. I joke, and well, I don't joke. It's true. We had two television stations, rabbit ears or antenna stations, CBS out of Marquette and the BBC out of Thunder Bay across Lake Superior. So there really wasn't a lot to watch, but my parents are originally from Chicago. And so we would go visit family from time to time, and we'd go down to visit my grandma. We'd always stay at my grandma. My grandma had this front porch. It was winterized, but that's where I pretty much lived outside of bathing and having meals. I was out there, and there was a little 9-inch TV. I just couldn't wait to go to Chicago and be in front of this 9-inch TV on the couch and sit there and watch television, because Chicago had lots of stations. I don't know if there was cable at the time or whatever, but there was just lots of stations to watch. And I always would go to the directory. I always came in the paper or the schedule, what was showing, or maybe there was a magazine that showed everything that was on. I mean, there weren't hundreds of channels, but when you go from 2 to 10, it's a lot, right? But they always had, Saturday afternoons or afternoons, they had these monster movies or these horror movies. And I loved watching those shows. I don't know why. Certain ones I like better. But nevertheless, I would go and look, and okay, this is playing. I would watch it and just be totally enthralled by it. My cousins enjoyed them, or my cousin Steve, and we would talk about them. But I would think about those movies as we would drive back to Houghton, Michigan, which was an 8-hour drive, pretty much due north. And I would always sort of think in my mind, okay, which monster could take which monster? Who was the baddest monster out there, right? Godzilla versus King Kong. You just kind of think about the attributes that these monsters had and who could take each of them. And in thinking about those many drives to Houghton and drives home and watching movies and that, it got me. I was reflecting on that when I stumbled upon an article by Dr. Adam Grant. And the article was it was an article that linked to a larger article in the New York Times, and I'll talk about that. But the article said, the most toxic, or the title for the article was online was "The Most Toxic Relationships Aren't What You Think," and I thought it was really interesting. This is, my whole business is about professional relationships. I'm very interested in relationships, why relationships work and why relationships fail. So that article really caught my attention. And what they find is that the most toxic relationships we have, and it is surprising, because I have had some really toxic relationships in my life, but it turns out that our frenemies, friends aren't toxic. Bad people in our lives are toxic, but the real toxic ones are the frenemies that we have out there. And the title of the article that Dr. Adam Grant had, that had written and put in the New York Times was, and you couldn't link to it because I don't subscribe to the New York Times, but nevertheless, why frenemies may be hazardous to your health. And what they found, and these were actual studies that they did, and Dr. Grant is with the Wharton School of Business at University of Pennsylvania, is that our frenemies cause us higher stress, and that frenemies are associated with higher um, artery calcification. And so, we have a lot of frenemies in our life. It's not good for our health. Now, what's a frenemy? A frenemy is somebody who is, by all accounts, a friend, but they also cause us more than just an average amount of consternation or angst in being around them. In thinking about that, what I analogized a frenemy to is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? That person, Dr. Jekyll was just a brilliant person trying to do wonderful things in the world, but when he became Mr. Hyde, it was anything but. He was deadly. And that's really kind of a classic example, going back to my watching monster movies, of, okay, that's somebody that you would want to be cautious around. And it makes sense, the whole notion that we have higher stress with respect to our frenemies because we don't know what we're getting. And so in thinking about what's the monster I would want to be around the least, it would probably be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah, certainly I wouldn't want to be on Dracula and the Wolfman and all that stuff, but at least you know what you're getting, right? It's Dracula. You know what? It's at night. I better wear garlic around my neck. Not that I want to, but you get what I'm saying. It's with the bad people in our lives, and I've had people, it's like, you know what? I'm just going to steer clear of them because they're bad people. And they just, and when I say bad, I don't mean breaking the law, but they're just their attitudes are just, they just, how they treat people. You just, it's pretty much always that you're getting, and you don't want to be around it, so it's easy to avoid. Whereas with, again, I'll use Dr. Jekyll. Okay, I'm with Dr. Jekyll, but I don't know when he's going to turn into Mr. Hyde, and so I have this incredible stress with respect to me. I can avoid Dracula, I can avoid the Wolfman, I have things I can do. I know they're always bad. But with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I didn't know what I was going to get, and that's what our frenemies are. They're kind of this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde persona. So what Dr. Grant did with respect to the article, what I will share from here is, what do you do? Because we all have friends in our lives, and that's great, and we all have enemies in our lives, and we avoid them. But what about the frenemies? What about those people? What do we do with those people? And I started reflecting on the article as I was preparing for this, and my first thought is, who are the frenemies in my life, and what can I do about it? Because that's what the articles really touches on. But my second thought is, okay, who am I a frenemy to? Who am I in somebody's life? Am I that person who's the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde? And I think the answer is yes. I am not perfect. Um, I think probably foremost on that list is probably my wife and kids, where, they'll get a good side of me and they'll get a bad side of me. And I'm not proud of that. I actually recorded an episode. There's an episode out there. It's episode 629, overcoming the periodic relational speed bumps. And that whole episode, I talked about that there are no relationships that just kind of, roll forward. Everything's wonderful. We're always going to hit these speed bumps. And our frenemies are just more speed bumps, and we don't know when those speed bumps are coming. And I'm sure that I am that person in some people's lives. I don't want to be. It's something I need to work on. And I just need to behave better. I need to, get more sleep. When I'm stressed, stay off the phone, not return emails, sit and think on things. So, there's lots of stuff that I can and should be doing. And I will. I see my collar is all messed up here. And I will. But I think, it's easy to look at other people and say, oh yeah, they're a friend of me. Shame, shame. I think we all need to first look at ourselves and say, you know what, where do I have room for improvement? And I need to focus on that. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is with respect to frenemies, the question that Dr. Grant gets at is the relationship worth salvaging? Is it worth investing in? And if the answer is no, then you treat your frenemy almost like an enemy. And I don't want to say cut and run, but it's like you minimize your interaction with them. Okay, I don't know when they're going to turn from Jekyll to Hyde, and it's not worth being around because the upside's not there. I'm just going to walk away from this. And I think that can be a very productive decision. It might seem a little cold, it might seem a little callous, but we if we have time with these people and it always takes us down, that impacts our other relationships, and that's not good either. And so it's good to be able to say, you know what, I am done with this particular relationship. It's good at times, it's bad at others. There's not a lot here. I just need to cut ties with this. And I think that's certainly that can certainly be a productive decision. But if you've determined that, in most cases, you'll determine that, you know what, this is worth investing in. These people are worth investing in. This person is worth investing in. If that's a yes, then what Dr. Grant indicates is that you need to open the door for honest communication, and that it can be very productive to sit down with somebody and say, you know, I'm uncomfortable at times with this relationship, and this is why. You know, I like you. I'm not saying creating a crap sandwich where it's nice on the front end and nice on the back end, but messy in the middle. But being honest with somebody and saying, these are the things that happened, and I'm not real comfortable with that. And I've tried to have these conversations. Well, I've had these conversations with some, but I've tried to have them with others, and they just don't go well. And at that point, it's like, you know what? It's not worth investing in. I can be 100% responsible for my 50% of the relationship, but I cannot be responsible for their half the relationship. And if they're not willing to have the conversation and have it be a productive conversation, then it's too much stress. I need to cut it out of my life. But you open the door for honest conversation, and most times it works out. Most times people will end up saying, or I'll end up saying, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that when I did that you thought this way, or that it impacted you this way. I didn't intend for that, or or maybe I did intend for that, but didn't realize it hurt you or made you that angry. And not that I'm intending to hurt somebody or make them angry, but I intend to say what I said or do what I did, not realizing how it might hit them. So the point of this particular episode is that our networks have three main buckets. We've got the good people, the friends in our life, great, and then we have the evil or the enemies in our life. You know what? It's good to know who they are. It's good to steer clear of them. And hopefully you've got a business where you're able to do that, where you don't have to be doing business with these sorts of people. And if you're not, trust me, in time, you will grow a relationship with enough good people and enough good clients that you can jettison those people. But the frenemies we have, we need to do some calculating there. We need to first determine if we need to determine one, if it's us. But the second part of it is, we need to determine if it's worth investing in. And if it's not worth investing in, then you just need to avoid the conversation altogether. But if it is worth investing in, take the time to communicate with the person where you felt uncomfortable, and try and build somewhat of a bridge to have a better relationship with them. Because I guess in the end, you really, I don't know that you'll ever have just two buckets, good and bad, because you're always adding people to your life, and you're always running into these the periodic relational speed bumps. But you want to minimize what's in that middle bucket. You want to minimize what's in that frenemy bucket. Either determine, okay, you know what, there are going to be people that I just don't associate with, or I'm going to try and have a better relationship, one or the other. And in the end, you'll just end up having a stronger network as a result.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.